It's the Sittin Sportside podcast
Can't wait.
with Mike James,
Come on, man.
John Longton,
Take that for data.
Cody Marshall,
Did you just get here? Can you give him your notes?
and Eric Hanman.
I have dedicated my life to this team, okay?
on 1045theteam.com.
And welcome into the podcast. I'm Eric Hanman here at 1045theteam.com. And for a second consecutive week, that four-person intro is reduced to two, and I am joined today by Cody Marshall.
your best friend, slowly becoming your best friend.
He's becoming the sixth man of the year. Well, I guess it'd be the fourth man of the year of our podcast very, very quickly. And today, he's going to be the MVP early on because he's going to bring up something that's been eating at his soul or something to that effect. Go ahead, Cody.
Interesting story that I saw this week. Still don't understand how it happened, and it comes from the world of softball. As the Women's College World Series tournament narrows its way down to those teams that are going to make the yearly trip to Oklahoma City, the University of Minnesota Golden Gophers team went 54-3 in the regular season. 57 games. That alone, and being able to finish out college is impressive.
Do you follow it closely enough, though, to really know the quality of those victories?
Not that much, but
You can infer enough.
like I can tell you that Ensley Gamble played for the University of Florida a couple years ago. That is how close I followed it. Anyways,
Gibberish. Respectable, though.
54-3. Of course, 26-game win streak. Very hard to do. Not many baseball teams do it, so we know that it takes a lot to win 26 games no matter who you're playing against. Number 1 ranking in the USA Today NFCA coaches poll. Number 3 ranking in the ESPN.com/USA softball poll. They don't even get one of the top 16 seeds in the NCAA tournament. Instead, they're sent to the Tuscaloosa Regional hosted by Alabama, even though their RPI, which takes into account their strength of schedule and everything, was 11th in the country. And so the thing that is burning at me is how bad the NCAA and their committees have been at this whole seeding thing this year. I mean, we're talking about what they did to Wichita State in the basketball tournament, what some people thought they did to the Albany women in the women's tournament,
right now.
and then what they did to
man.
what some people think they did to
But if
the
they're
lacrosse
really going to
team.
be worth it, they got to prove themselves in the tournament.
I know, but you're devaluing by not giving them a national seed.
Well, first things
you are
first,
devaluing
Wichita
what they
State
did.
did not get snubbed, and I'm one of the people, I do not believe they got snubbed. There's one thing to criticize a committee on what they especially for basketball where I'm more attuned. It's one thing to commit to say, okay, they made this team play this team, or like that's too hard of a bracket, I guess. Like, how can this team get an easy bracket while that team gets a tougher bracket? Like Villanova had or wasn't Villanova? It was what was Villanova? Had a really tough bracket just in general. I mean, they ended up losing to Wisconsin, which was that's a bad seeding in that one's right. But that one I'll agree with you, it's bad seeding. Wichita State to me is not a bad seeding.
They were
based on how they valued things. They didn't have
how the NCAA valued things.
Yeah,
not all the other metrics.
Illinois State did not make it, so obviously they did not value their conference wins that much. So to tell me that they won all their conference games, which Illinois State won most, I believe all their conference games except for the 2 that they lost to Wichita State. Correct me if I'm wrong there.
They split with Wichita State.
Right, that's what I'm saying. So they won all their matchups except for Wichita State.
Right.
Once.
Right.
And then same vice versa, and Wichita State got in, but Illinois State didn't. And then because of that third matchup in the conference championship was what mattered. If Illinois State would have made it in, but they didn't. Because for me, Wichita State, every big game that they had on their schedule, did they play it tough? Fine, they played it tough, but they lost all of them. There wasn't one game to me that was like, that's a win that they got. So to me, a 10 seed actually wasn't that bad of a seed. Did they play great in the tournament? Yeah, sure. They gave Kentucky a run for their money, but they didn't get over the hump. This year will be a good with Shamit. Great name, right? Shamit's going to be a big, part of their team now as a sophomore. He'll take a step forward this year, and he'll probably compete in the Atlantic, or it's the Atlantic, right? Atlantic 10 they moved in, or
the American Conference.
They moved to the American Conference. That was the other one.
Yeah,
I was good to say it was the American, not Atlantic.
Yeah, The American. They're going to be in with Cincinnati, Xavier.
Okay,
not
right.
Xavier. Xavier's in the Big East, but
that was the one I was thinking. In my mind, I was like, I'm getting this probably confused with the conference, and that was the one I was imagining. So, but they'll have every opportunity to show that if they could be a year-long team, and be like a team that's going to compete throughout the conference season when they don't have to face literally like teams that don't even matter in terms of college basketball postseason.
But here's the thing: is they played, and I know what you're trying to say, but they played Illinois State, who was in consideration for being into the tournament. We're not talking about teams who are in a conference that they're winning year after year after year because flat out nobody else is even close. I mean, people have made the argument.
You could also make the argument that Illinois State was only being considered because they did beat Wichita State, which would maybe improve their case, but
they also had a really good, and people talked about the strength of schedule. That is one of the biggest things that they go through, and they talk about how the NCAA values the RPI, but the RPI is so dated that now it doesn't take into account certain things.
I get if they can't get teams to play them, like what are you supposed to do? I applaud Marshall for probably being influential in it, and the athletic director being able to get them in a higher conference, because that's the only way I can see in my mind it actually being a solution. The solution isn't staying in their league and still not being able to get the conference games, because you're never going to build a good enough resume to get in unless because like the year that they were undefeated, they still and they lost to Kentucky then too, back when they were that 1 seed. To me, still they weren't that great. They didn't have anything special on a resume, and then they end up getting a bad draw there, which is that's a tough draw to get. A Kentucky team that is very good in the tournament on the second round game. If I remember correctly, too, the team that Kentucky beat would have been a challenge too. So that part, if you want to blame the committee on, I'm 100% for that, because, like I said, Wisconsin was a very tough matchup for Villanova to have had.
As a Wisconsin fan, I thought that they were going to get hurt by the slide they took after what they did in the
I'm more upset about how Minnesota got a 5 somehow when Wisconsin got an 8.
Exactly. This is what I'm saying.
That part, Wichita State, you just got me on something on Wichita State, which I wasn't on everybody else's ship. Like, I wasn't on that cruise ship with my feet back and I'm on Wichita State, ship. I was off it. I was in the sea. I was, expecting a buoy because everyone was like, you're crazy. But you'll never know. No one will ever be totally validated in this, but
right, but this is what I'm saying.
And then if you even want to go to football with it, if you want to go back to football with it, if you want to go to the first year of the tournament, of the playoff, and I don't want to take away what your train of thought is whenever it was on the basketball, but when Ohio State won it all, I was of a thinking that TCU had done enough to get in, and that Big 12 doesn't have a title game, right? And then Ohio State goes on and just demolishes the team that they played in their championship game. Was it Wisconsin? No, I don't know. I don't think it was. Maybe it was.
Ohio State, yeah.
It was Wisconsin.
Hammered Wisconsin.
Yeah. So they get in because they really showed what they could do, and that, to me, that Virginia Tech loss was a really bad loss compared to the TCU loss, which was a loss to Baylor that year. When guess who else was being considered to be put in that 4 was Baylor. So I thought TCU deserved it, and then they went out and they got the bowl game. They shellacked whoever they put in that bowl game. TCU did, and you'll never be. Was it Ole Miss?
I'm pretty sure
it was
Ole Miss.
So, and Ole Miss was good that year, like a top 10 type team that year, I believe. Or at least around.
It might have been around
top 20, top 15.
Yeah.
And they made a statement in that game. And basically what I'm getting to at this point, what I'm leading up to, is the committee might say afterwards and be sitting back in their chairs, hands behind their head, feet up on the table, like, he made the right choice. He put Ohio State in there, but you'll never know if that was TCU, if they also would have beaten Alabama and gone on to win the national championship. So, so these talks about the seeds, it's all hypothetical of the criticisms, as the same way of what did happen isn't necessarily what would have happened if things were changed. But now I feel like I'm unraveling. I don't know where I'm going with it now. But what I'm saying is a lot of the criticisms are hypotheticals that we'll never be able to prove. But a lot of times it's the I guess more what I'm trying to say is it's more of the popular opinion. So if a popular opinion favors one thing, then the committee's got to hear it. But if popular opinion favors them, the committee's fine. You know what I'm saying? It's all about popular opinion. It's not necessarily about what actually might happen,
But But this is what I'm saying. We talked about how poorly they went about seeding the Big Ten teams because none of it made sense. Minnesota getting a 5 seed when they had lost twice to Wisconsin, who ends up getting an 8 seed, who went to the Big Ten championship and lost to Michigan.
It doesn't make sense. This one does not make sense.
And who was clearly on the way up from that whatever that midseason skid was. I thought for sure 7 I could have lived with. Why they were made an 8, I will never understand. Because Michigan State also was given a 7, I believe, and Michigan State finished below them
7, you're right,
in the conference, despite beating Wisconsin once, because it was that one of those years you only play. The Wisconsin and Michigan State only met once at the Breslin Center,
and Michigan was a 8 as a no,
and Michigan was a 7.
7,
and they went into the conference tournament as a.
Oh, they were a 7. You're right. They were a 7.
As
Dang.
an 8 or 9.
They were the hottest team too.
Right.
Going into it.
I'm not taking anything away from Michigan. I thought they were a great team. Mo Wagner, I thought, was one of the most dynamic inside presences in that conference. And this is a guy who favors Ethan Happ.
You're just gonna name one player?
Well, I mean, you got
Derek Walton Jr. was very important in that team, and DJ Wilson, right?
Mo Wagner was the one guy who I looked at and I was like, you know what? This is the one guy who I feel is the most dangerous on the floor. If you're going to compete as far as inside.
He was dynamic, so he's a catalyst. I agree with that. Fine, fair enough.
But this is what I'm saying, is we're now looking at this seeding, and Mick Cronin's right. He hit the nail on the head that it doesn't necessarily matter your results. There's a whole lot to do with the money. And it was blatant. It was blatant in women's basketball. Everybody was like, oh, well, why'd you Albany get a 16 seed? Like, they never should have drawn UConn. Here's how it works. I can tell you how it worked. Number one, Albany did not have a quote-unquote great season compared to years past. Yes, they were well over 500. Yes, they won the America East. They didn't really play anybody. And not only that...
so you're making my case stuff for Wichita State. Thank you very much.
They didn't beat anybody.
Right. You're making my case stuff for Wichita State.
And then they lost to some really, really bad teams.
Well, then you're taking away from my case there, but...
Then, when you compare who the 16 seeds were, and you think, okay, well, how can we save money? The regional is going to be in stores.
Yeah.
Albany is the closest geographic 16 seed, if they were potential 16 seed, to go to stores. That's how that happened, I can tell you right now.
That's how everything happens in
D2,
basketball.
In D3, for sure. That is how it works. But this whole thing,
I don't like it.
How Minnesota does not get a top 16 seed in softball despite having 11th RPI, a 54-3 record when they play in the Big Ten. We're not saying that they play in some mid-major conference.
We're in some pretty big hindsight here. Like, this is a while ago. Championship game in college basketball was over a month ago at this point. But let me ask you this. Switch Villanova, mind you, they were the #1 overall seed, and Gonzaga. Does Gonzaga get eliminated in that bracket, and does Villanova make it to the Final Four? Because I think that Gonzaga got a easier bracket just because they're out west, because maybe location-wise, than Villanova.
Timeout. But that's because you typically, when you have a tournament, you geographically and to the best of your ability favor the highest seed. So now, this is where I'm getting to. Minnesota,
so
you're not giving them a seed, so you are making the tournament a harder road for them despite the work that they put in to a regular season of 57 games in which they won 54 of them.
Right. So are you making the argument for the basketball, though, that Villanova playing on, in Philadelphia or near Philadelphia, that hurts them because they were in the East?
No, I think that it should have helped them. I think it just flat out Wisconsin went and beat them.
Because what I'm trying to argue here is that somehow, after being the #1 overall seed, they had a tougher bracket, right? You had Duke in that, not that they showed up against South Carolina, but you had Duke in there. Baylor was an okay team, but obviously South Carolina was a formidable team in the end. Wisconsin, you brought them up, and Virginia and Florida ended up having a decent run themselves, but I thought that was more. I thought that maybe Arizona and Duke, who was in Gonzaga's bracket, was, Arizona might be comparable to Duke, who they ended up losing out to an Xavier who had a good run. But I didn't think necessarily that, maybe Notre Dame, but they didn't show up. They lost to West Virginia. I don't know. I just don't think that. I thought that the Gonzaga's teams in their bracket were maybe a little bit I don't know about easier, but softer than necessarily what Villanova had in theirs, and Nova was supposedly the number 1 overall seed.
I just think that,
especially coming out of that ACC tournament, we know because it's like, once again, in hindsight, Duke got outlasted and really laid an egg, if you will, again in the South Carolina game. So, but coming out of the ACC tournament, when they got Duke, Villanova as the 2 seed in their side of the bracket, it was like, well, how can this team be the number 1 overall seed if they're getting Duke as their 2 seed compared to, what was it, Arizona, Louisville, and Kentucky?
Yeah. Well, but this is what I'm saying, is I felt that
Duke was being considered for a 1 seed, and they ended up getting them as their 2 seed. So that's what I'm saying. Maybe the locations, because, Arizona's a West, so we'll put them in the West as well. Not saying that Arizona, the discrepancy between Arizona and Duke this year was like that great to where it was like, what? But location-less, to your point, made a play in that side of the bracket.
Right, but like I've said, you're supposed to geographically favor the top seeds in the NCAA tournament. They've made that known. But I think that they didn't follow the S curve.
But my argument here is that by favoring them location-wise, they
did them no favors as far as who they put in that.
I understand.
Location. And that's what I was getting to, is I firmly believe that they talk about the S curve, where you put your best 1, you go around the bracket, and then you go the opposite way for your 2, so that your best 1 ends up in the same bracket as, theoretically, your worst 2.
Right, so Duke, once again, the hindsight isn't great on them. They should have been in the same bracket as Gonzaga, who was supposed to be the 4th 1 seed.
Potentially, because I do not think that they followed a true S curve. I feel like they just kind of came up with some random formula to get these matchups to what they ended up being.
Now let's connect it to another sport, not to just harp on basketball. How about the latest college football playoff? So should a Penn State have gotten in over a Washington, or did Ohio State rightly get in over Penn State, I guess? Or Michigan was probably out of it. I guess the only real question mark would have been Washington, right?
Yeah, but I thought they did too much in order to get... I thought Washington was a lock.
That's my point, though. So now, I don't really know enough about the softball to really know what type of team this is. But Washington, like you just said, did enough. But as permanent eye test, I would have put myself another Big Ten team in there, because if I really want... It's not necessarily about who had the best resume, which I know it is true. But at least for football, for me, that was about which team had the best chance to beat Alabama. My personal one with best chance to beat Alabama was Michigan. Now, they probably were well out of it at that point, so I would have lived with Penn State. But instead it was Washington, because they had enough and they should have got in there, and they ended up getting pretty much shut down like they probably were going to do, as everyone kind of knew. I mean, they were able to get a shot at them, and the resume was there, but I just feel like the eye test and maybe even the conference test too, like the Pac-12, while I think the better team out of that conference would have been USC at the end of that year.
And they beat Penn State.
And they beat Penn State in the Rose Bowl. So, I feel like maybe more of who's hot right now. I don't know, but that goes against my argument about TCU should have gotten over Ohio State. So there's maybe favorites being played on both sides. I
think so as well. I mean, it would have been a hard argument to get Penn State in, because you look at all the things that went down. The bad loss, they got hammered by Michigan.
Right.
I believe they had 2 losses entering the postseason.
I think
they had lost to Pitt as well. And so that didn't look good until Pitt beat Clemson. But at that point, how were you going to move? Because they've already heard so much about how TCU theoretically by not playing got dropped from a 3 to a 6.
Right.
And so now you're saying, okay, well, how? So you're saying that now I think what really hurt them was the fact that all those teams lost in the same week. Clemson went down, Michigan went down. I feel like everybody was like, well, you can't move someone up when everybody at the top's losing if, these are your unbeaten or your one-loss team.
You said TCU, but you meant Washington, right?
No, because TCU, I'm talking about the year which you said that TCU didn't make it in. TCU did not play that week.
Right, because of the Big 12, there's no Big 12
championship. And all of a sudden moved from 3 to 6, even though they didn't play, because all of a sudden
because Ohio State killed Wisconsin, so they had to put them in there.
And I didn't think that was a strong Wisconsin team. And I'll be fair, Wisconsin has taken advantage of scandals at Penn State and Ohio State in order to get Big Ten championship berths, and the one year they did take advantage of that and end up winning the Rose Bowl bid because they hammered Nebraska. Because, I mean, you look at that, they technically finished, I believe it was third in their own division, got the berth because Ohio State and Penn State were ineligible, and then ended up beating Nebraska.
Right. And let's wrap up this part of the podcast. We only have about 10 to 15 more minutes on this particular podcast. And there's more Sittin Sportside podcasts up on youtube.com/team1045, or you can go to 1045theteam.com and check out all the great stuff there. Wrap this up real quick about wrap it into softball, and maybe even tie it into this past weekend's Albany lacrosse. I remember talking about how they had to face Maryland, and maybe not the greatest seed, having to face a top overall seed. I know there's been kind of buzz around in the area because of that.
All right, so Minnesota goes to this regional. Ironically, in that regional, the Tuscaloosa regional, the 4 seed was Albany. So they get hammered with this horrible seeding, lose 1 game to Alabama. Now they got to play Alabama again in order to just stay alive. But everybody was complaining about Albany seed, and this is my thing with the Albany seed, and a lot of people are going to hate me for this. But I didn't have a problem with that at all. Albany scheduled tough. I'll give them credit on that. But the problem is when you schedule tough, in order to give the committee a chance to seed you higher than what you think you should be, you got to pull off a win. They fell to Syracuse. They fell to Maryland. Yes, they might have been close, but Shakespeare said it best. A rose is a rose is a rose. A loss is a loss is a loss. And not enough big wins in a conference that doesn't really feature too many big-name teams and big-name programs. You got to find a way.
Yeah. So I'm going to move on here in the podcast, and we're kind of deep into this podcast, so I'm going to just make an executive decision. We're going to do the rest of this podcast. We're going to talk a little bit about a sport that we don't really talk about much on this podcast, and I know we've touched on it real quick. We can add in another sport too, but I want to get into a farewell to one of the best that ever was at Stamford Bridge, the center back who was calling it a career, at least at Chelsea, John Terry, get to lift his trophy in his final game, passing along the captain to Gary Cahill. It was a really good moment for him in the 5-1 victory against Sunderland. Granted, he came off with a 1-1 tie, but great moment for Chelsea as they already had everything locked up. I believe they set the record for most wins in a Premier League season. Those blue shirts, man. Good stuff, right? Better than Tottenham.
Well, they will be for another year. And it's nice to see how Tottenham has performed these last 2 years. I mean...
Okay, now you're gonna turn John Terry's farewell.
No. But what I was gonna say was
classic Spurs guy right there.
Well, it is what it is. You'll get over it eventually. So before I kind of got into the English Premier League and started following it a little more, I always saw, okay, it's the same teams at the top year after year. There's not a whole lot of parity. What I've seen from the league in the last 2 years,
last year,
you got Leicester City comes out of what do you call it, League One, or whatever is the next.
They have English Championship League.
Okay, there you go. And they come from that. They win the Premier League, and the whole idea of relegation, I think, is awesome.
I've been starting to try a fantasy league that way, where you have to work your way up in a fantasy league.
There are so many.
It'd be kind of hard to run that, but I've been running it by different, like ESPN, Yahoo. They don't want it, man. It'd be awesome.
It'd be great. I mean, the Houston Astros from a couple years ago, they do bad. Send them down to AAA. Bring up the best AAA team. It's a great idea.
There's not enough. I feel like teams. I'd be like saying that the independent D League teams you take away. So basically you're taking away the minor league system of it, or you can leave those teams in there and create new D League type teams. So instead of going to, or I guess you could still say, this doesn't make sense. I guess you can't have best of both worlds there, where you have a team being able to send their players there as well as compete to get in the league. But it'd be like saying having a D League type team being able to be promoted every year, but then it just the competitive level of that team. Could the best D League team beat the Nets in a relegation battle? Maybe, but it'd be interesting. I don't know.
Could Alabama beat the worst NFL football team?
See, the answer to that question always feels to me as no. I never really say yes to that question.
You don't think the Alabama Crimson Tide could have beat the Cleveland Browns?
There's still guys there who are not going to play in the NFL.
I hear you.
Everybody on the Browns are NFL players. There's no disputing that. They're an NFL team, for gosh, sake. There's people in Alabama that are going in, they're either going to get their graduate degree, they're going, to be in the workforce the next year or the next 2 or 3 years. They're going to be overmatched at certain positions. Do I think it's impossible? No. I mean, anything is possible. I mean, I was just reading the Lonzo Ball story about how his team, when he was 11, his brother 10, and his younger brother 8, beat a bunch of varsity high school kids because they, ran them out of the gym. That's a pretty big age discrepancy too. I'm not sure about size because they're big boys now, so they might have been tall for their ages. But my point is, anything can happen any given Sunday, right?
Right. And
Al Pacino.
And that's what I'm saying. Is the Premier League has shown me that it's really not just Chelsea every year, Arsenal, Man U, Man City. That some of these other teams are finally getting in there, and you really can't predict what's going to happen the following year. Leicester is now in the middle of the pack after winning it a year ago. There were a couple teams who have been in the Premier League for a while. Crystal Palace, for a while at the beginning there, was looking at being relegated, a name that even though they haven't really done anything, they've been in the league for so long.
Sunderland's been kind of like a cockroach over the years and never been bad enough to be relegated, but officially this year they have been.
Yeah, and it makes the season interesting. And then you watch more and more.
Here's the thing. What they lack in playoffs, they get in incentives. So like Chelsea wrapped this up a couple of weeks ago. Tottenham was eliminated and it's all over. But what was played for this past Sunday, was who's going to be the 2 of the top 4 teams. And we saw Man City, Liverpool, and Arsenal vying for those spots. And why is being one of the top 4 teams important? Because it gives you a bid into the Champions League of the next year, which is a league that consists of teams from all over the different leagues. Bundesliga, La Liga, like all those leagues. So you get an automatic bid into that. Well, you can't get a bid if you're not in the top 4.
Right.
But you get into that. And so like Arsenal got left out of that. And that was sad. So what they lack in playoffs, they have in that incentive. So Sunday, while you say, oh, Chelsea won that 2 weeks ago, why do those games matter? Well, those games mattered on Sunday because of that. And then the classic, who's going to get the golden boot? So Lukaku had a chance to be able to catch up to Kane, but he did not. And then the relegation, like you said. I don't have a story in my mind from this past Sunday, but I'm sure in the past, and there's been games that have mattered on the last day of the season to if you win or you draw, you possibly stay in the Premier League, and if not, you're heading down to the Championship League, may not even get back ever, in the next 5-10 years. Could be a while to get back.
Right, and you think of how important this is. I mean, like for Leicester City, where people were so excited to see their team win, obviously, but think of the road they had to travel. They had to perform high enough at the championship level to then be promoted and then win that one. And imagine if they had all of a sudden, everybody figured them out and now they were being relegated again. You have no idea how long it could take once you're relegated to get back into it. And I wouldn't be surprised if someone in those towns look at it and they're like, well, we haven't been in the Premier League since the 1940s. So, we may never get back.
Right. And if anyone listening to this podcast is confused about this, doesn't know much about the Premier League and the relegation that we've been talking about. So basically, there's a bunch of different leagues here, and I don't necessarily know how far it goes. I know you were talking about the League One. I believe there is the League One and then the League Two, which is how it goes down from Premier League, English Championship. There might be one in between here, but I believe it goes League One and then League Two. So basically, the bottom 3 teams of the Premier League automatically get relegated to the Championship League, while the top 2 teams in the Championship, they automatically get in. But now, this is where it gets cool, and if you really want to, watch maybe not the highest level of soccer, but some important games, like the playoffs that is in soccer or football, wherever you want to call it, there's the next 4 teams in that Championship League. They play to get that 3rd spot. So you could be the 6th best team, or in that case, it would be like, well, there's 24 teams in that table, I believe. So whatever worst team. So you could be not the best team that year, but have a really good matches there on the pitch, and still be able to get in that. So there is some excitement in soccer. Just you got to find it,
Exactly. And not only that, but you're looking at guys who are mixed in together from all around the world. I mean, you're looking at guys who, some of them play in Europe, some of them play in the United States here, some of them play in
don't even get me started.
Africa.
And know, if you want to know about this, you look it up and do your own researching. Because don't get me started. I know what the transfer window is. I know you can loan. I know you can buy players. But man, like some people are getting paid euros, other people are getting paid pounds. Loaning, all this stuff. And some people are getting paid dollars, for crying out loud, because you can be loaned from the from a English team to the MLS team, which MLS is in full swing this year.
Right.
Which I'm not sure we're going to get into that per se, because this is all about giving the proper respect to John Terry. And I believe Frank Lampard's officially retired too. So all these great Chelsea players just need to get a nice, Terry already got a nice goodbye at Stamford Bridge. But man, these are the players that I grew up, like the reason why I liked Chelsea, even though I wasn't a big, football guy or soccer guy. I still haven't decided what I'm going to call it. It's like
Are you getting emotional?
Because my sister lives over there now, so now I feel like I should say football. Maybe only when her husband, is around, and then when Americans are around, say soccer, right? I don't know.
Well, I thought this too the other day, because if you look on one of the teams that was playing earlier, Minnesota United,
right? So
Minnesota United FC.
So it's really
they're
weird.
In the United States. So is it only a matter of time before we start calling it football here as well?
A lot of the teams coming over, and the reason why I'm not necessarily 100% on Minnesota, but I know for a fact with the New York City FC, it's a combination between the Yankees and Manchester City. So that would explain it to me why they're the FC, and I believe a Los Angeles club is going to be, they used to be Chivas United as well as the LA Galaxy. Well, that team folded, and there's going to be a new team. I believe Will Ferrell is going to be part of the ownership there. It's going to be, I believe it's going to be called Los Angeles Football Club as well. And then there's that
Sporting KC.
Sporting Kansas City. I believe it's soccer club there. But I know for a fact there's an Orlando City Soccer Club. It's right. Orlando City SC. So I think it's just a matter of whatever the teams want to do, right? Because it's just like some of them are going to go FC and some of them are going to go SC. But I was getting emotional, and because one of those things where, because for me, I kind of regret some things. And you want to ask why?
Why?
Because we live in a sport where you know me, I like a lot of sports. So you don't always, and now with jobs, it's not easy to watch a lot of this stuff. So, when you're watching sports at night and you want to sleep in and you don't have no reason to get up, so I've DVR'd some games in the last couple of years when DVR has been a big thing. But because the games are so early, because it's 5 hours ahead of time, it's hard to necessarily always see them. And it's like, sometimes you wake up and you check your phone. It's like, do I even want to watch this today? Because I just checked my phone and I already blew it for me. And maybe you fast forward through it and to watch the goal highlights. But other than that, man, I may have dropped the ball and seeing as much John Terry as I wanted. And now that's why I'm getting a little bit emotional maybe about it.
And you forget that NBCSN is even a channel except for when you're watching the Stanley Cup playoffs. And no, I hear you. I mean, there have been times where I see Tottenham games offered at 11 o'clock in the morning, and I'm like, it's just bad timing because I feel like there's not a lot of people who really want to.
If I didn't care more, if I didn't care less, if I cared less about basketball or baseball, right, I'd probably be like, all right, tomorrow they're playing at 11. I'm going to get up and watch. But because I have so much interest in other sports and maybe my interest in soccer / football, whatever you guys want to call it, isn't as high as other people, that would make sense why I don't necessarily get up for it. But the games I do like to watch sometimes, and every once in a while, I'm not trying to make myself look like a soccer nut, because there's a lot of people who are Americans that know so much more than me. And just Matt Woods, who works for the station, right. You can hear his segment on Levac and Gaz every Friday, I believe. But the game I do like to watch every once in a while, though, are the MLS games. And I haven't been able to pick a team yet because I was a Red Bulls fan, and then the FC comes over, and so what do? I'm a Yankee fan, so FC comes over, and they're Yankee related, but then also too they're Man City related. Don't like Man City, so it's kind of like a half and half there. I was already a Red Bulls guy, and now they've actually, because now you have pubs down in New York City who certain pubs are for this team, certain pubs are for that team. We've seen it for Arsenal, we've seen it for teams that are overseas. Now you see it for teams that are here domestically. And I remember seeing it. There was a fight between two different bars. I believe they were pretty close, or maybe at one bar, which was FC versus Red Bull. So now there's a pretty big rivalry between the two. Do I have to pick now, Cody? I don't know.
And then think about how much this league itself has
growing.
expanded over the years.
Oh my gosh, it's
what was an Atlanta fan supposed to do a couple
I would
years ago?
put money if I could invest. You probably can invest into it, so I'm probably being an idiot by not actually doing it. But I would put money in investing in the MLS because it's one of the fastest growing leagues, and I feel like a lot of players are starting to want to come over. I think that the MLS could be a top league, like a Premier League and like a La Liga, at some point in the next 10 years. I really believe it because it's the fastest growing league. They're expanding like crazy.
And that's the thing is, think about this. If you were in Atlanta 2 years ago and you just picked a favorite team, and then now all of a sudden Atlanta United comes in,
true.
are you an Atlanta United fan just by default now, or are you like, oh, I'm just gonna stick it out and be a true,
And how's it gonna work in LA? Because they're gonna have a similar problem that I'm having right now. Because I'm sure a lot of them are Galaxy fans, and everyone, I don't know if everyone knows, but if Galaxy is a team that has been very successful in MLS. And so I'm going to imagine if you pay attention to soccer over there, you're probably going to be a Galaxy fan because they've been successful. They've had a lot of good players too. I mean, David Beckham, Landon Donovan, the most famous probably American player in the last 10, 15 years. So,
you're taking something away from Clinton Dempsey, are you?
I think I love Clinton Dempsey.
I
was rooting for Seattle. He was injured during last year, but I was still rooting for Seattle because first off, I like their colors. Second of all, I like video games, and they're sponsored by Xbox. But third of all, Clint Dempsey's on the squad. And I don't really want to root for Toronto, but I love Josie Altidore. So a lot of this is players for me too. I mean, I guess I'm not into the league enough to where I'm like really so hard against certain teams. Because like I said, I was okay with Josie Altidore if they won, but I was still rooting for Seattle because Dempsey was on the squad even though he's injured.
But so now because you like those colors, does that mean that sometimes you like the Seattle Seahawks? I mean, because do you ever think this?
Well, I guess I have more of an invest. I do like their colors.
There's a lot. You look at a couple leagues, like you look at.
I guess it's more about Xbox. Sorry.
Pittsburgh's most famous for this is the color schemes for these teams.
Yes,
the Seattle Sounders, Seattle Seahawks. The WNBA, you saw it pretty much every single franchise with whatever their NBA squad was. You got the New York Liberties, blue and orange. The only difference is they got the teal because the Statue of Liberty's in it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's Pittsburgh. You've got all black and gold for all your teams: the Pirates, the Steelers, and the Penguins. I mean, it's.
And then you mentioned New York, right?
It's.
I mean, it makes sense to have that mentality. We know the Mets the reason why they do because it took the orange from the Giants and the blue from the Dodgers. But I guess, it makes sense because. Even though, what are the percentages who are fans of all 3/4, if you want to count the Liberty, of those? And then who, I would imagine a lot of them are all Pittsburgh fans that live in Pittsburgh, but maybe they're not.
You'd never get in trouble for wearing
now, let me ask you this.
A uniform of one sport to a event for another sport. You could wear a Steelers jersey to a Pens game. It makes sense.
Penguins, Penguins and the Pittsburgh people, Steelers. Who do they root for in terms of basketball, you think? Do they stay in state and go over to Philly? I doubt it.
Is that a crime, though? I feel like that'd be like a Western Pennsylvania versus
Eastern
Pennsylvania.
Do they go down
crime.
and try to find maybe Washington? Is that too far down?
I don't know. I've always wondered that. That's
interesting.
Or do you think they just not care about
They just don't care.
Or they got the Panthers. Maybe they just pack it in on that one.
There you go.
Maybe there's something in the works to turn the school colors from navy and gold to black and gold in order to get them on board.
Well, what's a black and gold basketball team? There isn't one. Right, and now they're looking to steal fans now.
Maybe if the Suns,
Vegas is looking to steal fans now, huh?
They got a black and gold hockey team.
Oh no, Vegas is going to steal some Pittsburgh Penguins. No, not a chance. All right, so this has been the Sittin Sportside podcast, and I've been Eric Hamm, and that's been Cody Marshall. And you can listen to some other Sittin Sportside podcasts that we will have up momentarily on youtube.com/team1045. If you have any questions for us, you can tweet them at us. For me, that's at Eric H1045, and Cody
at Marshall You Heard, HEARD.
HE.
Little play on the college there, the Marshall University Thunder Herd. Marshall
cool.
You Heard.
Cool. I got you. All right, so we will look out for those questions, possibly if you have any. I mean, I don't know. It'd be cool if we got one, right?
We're not highly questionable like Dan Levin.
Yeah, no, but it'd be cool if we'll answer those on our next podcast. If you have them by next Sunday, that would be May 28th. We'll see. Not banking on it by any means. Once again, I'm Eric Hamm, and that's Cody Marshall. Thanks for listening to the Sittin Sportside podcast right here on 104.5 The Team. We will see you next time.
Can't wait.